Okay, I'm gonna try and get a good setting here. I made an audio note here a little earlier, just a few minutes ago, and I've been talking about some information that seems to be involving like available information, actually like talking about it and sounding like I know what I'm talking about and not realizing something about alphanumeric linguistics. And normally what it is about alphanumeric linguistics is sometimes more so a pronunciation other than maybe a degree term and a degree within description based upon its definition of its intended use. Sometimes in alphanumeric linguistics, separate from its intended use, or some ambiguity, some ambiguous thing like having multiple definitions, but something more so beyond that of like many meanings, or a word or a phrase having several practical applications, a principle in different direction of intended use, yet still not exactly the pronunciation of the word itself. And sometimes in alphanumeric linguistics, it's sometimes based upon pronunciation itself. I mean, even broken into syllables, or kind of like almost like the perception of linguistics that would maybe more so geographically be like a specific immediate area based upon terminology of like what availability means, normally predominantly not limited to a method of banking, but also investment terminology that ultimately gets to the predominant factors of how the quality of living life, normally thought of like whether if annuity is the issue, or having earned some idea based upon what meaning and value any type of degree or any type of idea as an associate or anything beyond, or even employment. And I think sometimes many people don't see the idea of employment quite the way even the general section seems to have the issue of principles of supplemental security income, of non-taxable income. And the general section really presents the issue more so sometimes of like welfare and the similarities of low income as compared to supplemental security of like non-taxable income. Yet welfare presents the issue of like a low income, and based upon that and in the category, it's almost like the recent statute sometimes. And the IRA, it's almost like the one James Bond movie that's not about the bond sometimes. The Jameson Law unit, okay, I'm not real thrilled about, the thought of anything about prison in the way, okay. The thing with it is that it's the alphanumerics of 91, okay. And the Jameson Law unit is like the alphanumerics of 200, okay. And the thing with this is that, like in circuit, okay, the whole idea is that, a tax credit as a projected estimate option in future as annuity, as a prepaid tax of an IRA, okay, and what a tax credit is beyond, the Internal Revenue Service form, the who knows anyway form, okay. And the thing with this is that, the whole new perception, as compared to the thought of like what would only be some idea whether it's a tax credit or a deduction. The word is credit on the tax form. A tax credit is not even attached or even defined in description by any kind of comparison. A tax credit not even involving the Internal Revenue Service. Yet on the IRS form, the 1040A or B, sometimes it's probably been mentioned on the IRA part about the 1040EZ form. But the thing with this is like the difference between a tax credit or a credit or a deduction, and normally the word involving employment as a deduction would only be not the idea of a tax credit. Credit normally doesn't even identify like on the form itself. I mean, I haven't seen it yet involving any financial institution other than the 1040 form. Not that it's identified as comparable references, similarities of supplemental security, only the similarities of non-taxable income in the way of an IRA, of a projected estimate option in future, of like a prepaid tax. Okay, the thing with this is that even the recent statute and the IRA, it seems to be the difference between knowing, something beyond, what would be, the thought of, beyond the classroom. Okay, and that's really sometimes, the deal about alphanumerics and linguistics involving, the idea of like a manufactured geographic option that seems to be like now, what availability only means maybe the thought of maybe what making and manufacturing a circuit is based upon, the idea of incorporation, or the thought of maybe even a television being used, or maybe even the thought of a company being used like a stationary engineering factor of a fixture in real estate. Normally, my thought now of like the yays and nays, it used to be like a big deal involving, whether or not if it's really a big deal about the congressional act and the Senate as compared to, the next T plunge and what the deal is about it, and the pool. Normally the pool in terminology normally involves collections, not necessarily limited to, but collections as suggested as a pool as a collection as defaulted balances. I mean, if it needs to be the thing with it is about the collection in a pool is that normally that on the negative side, it seemed to be the issue of like, whether if credit is, the thought of maybe a deduction more so in that way of terminology as compared to the tax credit being, some idea of like a prepaid tax and the similarities of an IRA. Okay, yet a trust fund likewise in addition. I mean, the similarities is unreal. Some of the information at the final expenses at a funeral home. The similarities in the information like final expenses involving like a burial. I mean, the similarities are like so, and almost like the information is so compatible in the similarities of a trust fund. I mean, it's ridiculously not cool sometimes that even, think, I mean, recognizing analytically something about that. It's like sometimes like really not cool about, whether or not if a method banking is, the idea of a certificate of deposit, or, whether or not if it's a registered charity, or, maybe neglect based on lack of experience of, national deficit available in closed caption hearing impaired as compared to, what I see now is the American Express Bluebird card presenting the 4-digit, security code on front and a 3-digit on the back. It's automatically like MP4 format of like, audio video. And on the backside, it's almost like, the backside on a toilet, sitting on a toilet almost with a 3-digit. Not necessarily that it has to be Mercedes or some idea, of, beyond Toucan Sam and the white porcelain, beachfront, the white toilet and, the silver, thing about, monochrome and, the deal about, the high silver toilet, okay? And some idea of the blue and purple bird, okay, once again, of the Israeli flag and the 6-point star presenting the telepathic angel thing about the 6-point star, or the schematic of the triangle representing the big mouth of the river being the delta, and the pi r squared. It seemed to be, the pi r squared, the E equal mc squared, and the exponential quotients of powers of multiplication. And it seemed to be the big deal about, the deal about going beyond the classroom of expenditures. And, I don't know if it just has to be the idea of defense. But, that is a biblical scripture. Money is a defense. I'm not real sure if expenditures is the thought of professing in the way as a defense. Money is a defense. The movie with Chevy Chase, the best defense, okay, is the thing that presents the laser and the satellite. And even, the scanning of the barcodes, raising a bar, okay. But, the thing about the colors and the pastels that seem to be, the rainbow and an identical twin thing about, on one side, it's like, a Saturday morning. And like I mentioned before, it's like approximately the same time, yes, of a baptism. That seemed to be the thing, about, one of the reasons why, that particular, unit, James Linoleum, the alphanumerics of 200, or the Lord Jesus Christ, or, a plenipotentiary, the 200-year celebration of America, or a bicentennial quarter, or a bicentennial drummer, the alphanumerics of 200, that location seemed to be, the deal about the identical twin rainbow. And that one biblical scripture, money is a defense. Yet COVID ID 19, okay, is the alphanumerics of 72, the same as money, or the world, okay? And not limited to, the thing about school, okay? And also, you've heard it pretty much about a freshman, about the fish, okay? The freshman and the fish thing about, I don't know if it's true about every freshman, first year in high school, thing about the fish, okay? But ultimately, it seems to be the deal about, the thing about, ultimately the electronic schematic fish, beyond, the big mouth of the river and like the Plymouth Rock deal about, even Christopher Columbus' 200-year celebration of America. Likewise, in addition, the similarities of the 200-year celebration of America being the idea of freedom. Yeah, likewise, Abraham Lincoln night vision deal about, the first president studying in the dark. Predominantly the thing about, the kernel in American history that way. And, the kernel being an issue of like computer programming of one of the oldest governmental computer mainframes, not limited to, in the language Ajax, okay? It's like the black and white thing. Even the similarities with the Oracle Corporation on Smith Avenue. And this one thing I did notice that there had been like a change in perception of the website itself of Oracle Corporation. And that one particular location, as compared to Redwood, California of Oracle Corporation, the one in Houston at Smith Avenue, that presented the idea. I mean, like it become like the issue of like even Univision, even the Remo black dot drumhead and the Aquarium Power white dot, and the colors of the pastel being 73 in Paris and Egypt, and the Israel 64 HTTP:// the programming thing about Israel and Israeli being 73, Israel being 64 and American. The thing with this is that, okay, America Online, okay, and the AOL, like an Oracle Corporation, the L, seemed to be the deal about like 64, okay, and the first, two of the last four of the Social Security Administration being 12 being L and 12 and 13 being like L&M and legal media, okay. The thing with this is that ultimately in chronological with alphanumeric from, A to Z being 1 to 26, then, repeated again, 27 to like 52, then 53 to like 78, and then from like 79 to 104, it's like the 4 years, it's like the third and fourth generation. It's almost like now, and in addition now, it's like the American Express, the Bluebird card, okay? But in my mind, it's ultimately really the blue and purple bird of Israel. You probably, seen the Airbus thing about, helicopters as compared to the Bluebird bus of what that means in circuit, okay? The thing is about the American Express and the Bluebird card, okay, it presents the deal with the 4-digit, like, security code on front. It's like, automatically the MP4 format and the backside with the 3-digit security being like the MP3, audio and video, and then just audio. It's like the national deficit available in closed captioning for the hearing impaired that way. And the thing about the Bluebird, okay, seemed to be really, really about the blue and purple bird of Israel, called the Whoopa. And the oldest governmental computer mainframe called the Whopper. Okay, I mean, it's like a known fact with anyone like who has actually, been involved and, considered, looking for, just whatever it needed to mean. And that's just like some of the stuff and available information that I realized people had referred to, involving like Burger King, and a little bit of humor about a misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, ultimately getting to like a moat around a kingsmanship. And what that is in kingsmanship is like the Henry VIII thing, and like, the moat, like, surrounded like a castle and a kingsmanship as the English Parliament. And what that means to be, some paraphrasing idea of, 2-9-hole golf courses, or, the thing about it, okay, the thing is that ultimately, the moat, okay, it's like a deep trench around, a castle representing a kingship. Even, some idea of like, what jurisprudence is, or, what venue is in a courtroom, or what the tennis court really is of investment terminology as compared to some idea, like defining the meaning of what, commerce dictating, or the Chamber of Commerce, the commerce, or, what that is, beyond, separate from, the thought of what administration is or is not. Ultimately, it seems to be, in my mind, ultimately, commerce dictating what's on or offshore. Not limited to, or the only issue, but it seemed to be really the big difference of investment terminology that way. Suggesting, investment terminology involving, human capital is ultimately getting to the reality of investment terminology that distinguishes the difference between the acronym of SAN software, whether it's going to be like the storage area network, like, doing business hours of like an ATM, the US dollar, or maybe a disregard of maybe responsibility, or whatever suggested is involved with like import and export or banking systems, international banking systems, and immigration custom enforcement, and how that's practical application of principle applied to banking of immigration customs enforcement, and what that really means to like, you know, even the euro dollar and 7 nations and the 7 monies of Europe as compared to even the Japanese yen. The thing about Japanese being 71 parallel is ultimately, you know, my thing about, you know, the symbolic representation, like Diners Club being that circle with one vertical line and reading Japanese from top to bottom, and ultimately, you know, it gets the quantum. In any case, so like, in any case, you know, it seemed to be the deal about, you know, Diners Club that way, and alphabet's 107, ultimately getting to quantum. And the thing of this is that I was just referring to, you know, the thing about some information involving, you know, the CVT, okay, because the continual variable transmission, and the alphanumerics are like the IEEE being 24, and, you know, with the big O thing about the organization, and the O it would being 15, and 24 being 39, yet, you know, at the same time, the O being a 0 being 24, and like 0, 240, and it is the European standard of 240 that defines the meaning. It seems to be ultimately, you know, getting to be the deal about facts. And even Tom Cruise saying, feeling the need for speed. Well, you know, here in Houston, the Harris Corporation, okay, Caprock Communications on the South Beltway 8, predominantly was like the Caprock Telecommunications, then it changed to Harris Corporation, Caprock Communications, and now it's like Speedcast. I haven't looked lately. And now it seems to be the thing about Australia, okay? And you know, even, you know, Sydney, Australia, it seems to be the thing right now about Speedcast. Even, you know, the thing about Tom Cruise going, feel the need for speed. But the thing it is about, you know, where it seems, what it really seems to be ultimately, you know, anyone who really gets serious about, you know, studying alphanumerics and linguistics will ultimately, like, realize something about the television, or, you know, some idea of like a deed restriction or a medical power of attorney being used in fiction and real estate. Or, you know, the who knows anyway form, or what squelch is, as compared to the redundant frequency of the absolute zero, and the way, and what region zero seems to be of, like, center point energy, and the capability. I've called center point energy several times because, like I've been, like, really been seriously getting a little bit overbuilt. And when it got to the point, you know, that thinking that region zero had been the idea of, like, the front lines of the beachfront of, like, importing and exporting, immigration, customs enforcement, or some idea of international banking systems having, like, intellectual property in that way, separately disregarding any citizenship or birthrights that way, or whether or not, if you know, the what seems to be now the Texas-New Mexico power is not necessarily the excuse. It seems to be like almost a requirement, and I'll have to think about it, because it seemed to be, you know, the Roosevelt New Deal Act, okay, and Del Taco, okay, and being led by the angel, the LED Del Taco, LED. It's like a light-emitting diode of, like, even the pastel green and pastel red. Pastel green being of ambience, okay? Like night vision. And the 13-band graphic equalizer, okay? And the impedance being a pastel red. Okay, likewise, a 13-band graphic equalizer. Not even on the same one, identifying it, you know, as ambience is the pastel green. And it's only, like, one light. And I've only seen it, like, on 3 13-band graphic equalizers, okay? And I think the only one it was normally not available as any product from Mexico was the one, I think it was the Pyramid, like, 13-band graphic equalizer. I think that was the only one from Mexico that had something about, if my memory serves me correctly, it was the pastel red of, like, impedance, as compared to the Texas-New Mexico power. The New Mexico, I mean, if ultimately that one 13-band graphic equalizer represented that red LED light, or Del Taco being led by the Spirit, you know, it's amazing that's even a biblical. If ye be led by the Spirit, your sins shall be forgiven. Are you kidding me? What sin? An ear squared, a taco squared. You know, I mean, it really, it's not normally the thought of, like, having a checking account using the U.S. dollar, some idea of, like, international banking systems having fair use of the U.S. dollar, or maybe being some thought of, like, within signal strength, all of the thought of maybe, you know, maybe what intellectual property only might mean as some idea of, like, some telepathic perception or persuasive technique of thinking that would only suggest whether or not, if any claim based upon any, you know, suggestive way of thinking would only be maybe predominantly maybe the thought of maybe what claim only means based upon whether if the who knows anyway form is really a participating factor, or maybe just suggesting maybe having the parents, but, you know, or the form of God, and the denying the power thereof thing, right? Or, the thought of like a, who knows anyway form of a vice president network, maybe. Or some idea of like governance that would only present maybe only the thought of jurisprudence having use of like gross national product, normally of warehousing, and the one and only word, predominantly, it seemed to be the only black color code of jurisprudence being the black back and the color of the pastel green, representing jurisprudence, likewise the colors of the golf course. Yet two distinctly different colors of pastel green, likewise with Sprite. I like Sprite in it, and even British Petroleum. And you've heard of, hey, make America great again, like Great Britain, okay? And, the thing about, the Great Seal of the United States, I mean, the Great Seal of the United States, and there's the dating service of, like, the fine, upstanding, high society of, great expectations, okay? And, I mean, the similarities of, like, the scale of ads and the Houston Chronicle and the Houston Post, predominantly the Houston Chronicle, of, like, great expectations. And I'll actually have to think about it, but the similarities, and I don't know if I'd even call it a sequence, but were like whole pages of like Sunday newspapers, sometimes Saturday, predominantly Sunday for about a 6-week period, sometimes maybe even an 8-week period. Likewise, the category of catalyst was a deal, and it was not limited to, chemical processing or, food processing. It included food, all kinds of like catalysts, as far as like edible and beverage, and even, chemicals involving, like refineries and chemical plants that way. And the thing with this is that ultimately, it'd been the thought of like the category itself, and it became so, the thing about memory minus de facto, that it seemed to be, really sometimes almost the similarities between great expectations. It seemed to be, deal about bubblicious, okay? It's like a Friendswood Quaker Church thing. I mean, and we tried it. It's like the TriStar, like a Christian television network, and being on the Concord, breaking the sound barrier. Some bubblicious thing. Hey, that's an awesome bubblicious portfolio. Are you dyslexic? Some idea. Like even Fuddrucker. Yeah. But anyway, it's like a little bit of humor about that, because and I'm going to stay pretty much within spectrum of humor. But when it gets to something about including like the length of and the humorous bone in between the shoulder, and yeah, I'll do that on a separate one. I don't feel like combining it like right now, okay? Or some pi r square factor about anatomy and involving like orthopedics. In any case, yeah. So like yeah. So anyway, so like the humor about that seemed to be the thing about whether or not you see the deal about quantum, okay? And the absolute values, I mean, like drumsticks or conductors, the conduct report, like drumsticks, or, thought of like the thought of conductivity in a way of the semiconductor, like the pi r squared. Most people might only think that the semiconductor isn't normally thought of a pi r squared factor. The semiconductor, or like a conductor of an orchestration, of like an orchestra, only using one conductor, as compared to, even the double bass drummer using 2 drumsticks, or absolute values that way, represented vertically of like, going to like algebra and calculus on into quantum. But the thing of it is that in formative computation, okay, beyond calculus, with the absolute values and some separating issues, and really knowing or not knowing what algorithm is or is not, seemed to be really the deal. And a whole new perception, the algorithm, okay? And ultimately it seemed to be like, terminology of like, William Jefferson Clinton and Al Gore. It seemed to be, like the, presidential term in office, of the century, really. Including, the deal about, the inaugural ball in 1992 with Chevy Chase, like, hosting. It was his own words that he chose for himself, hosting. Or, the thought about, the AIDS thing, okay? And for real, okay? And, the host and the AIDS thing, it's almost like really not cool sometimes to even suggest combine and the thing about governance, and what maybe the real issue going through the circuit, and the Stargate program involving shadow government between the Pentagon and the Octagon, and there's like some issues that seem to be like really right now. But in any case, okay, the thing with this is that like right now, I'm thinking about the deal of I mean, for real, like within, signal strength. In any case, yeah, so like, I have something to say about, thought of like the CVT being like the continual variable transmission as compared to the commercial venue, and whether or not if importing and exporting is the only issue of tariff representing some idea of protected water 200 mile around the United States. The thing of this is like, ultimately if international banking systems is using some idea of intellectual property is duration or only what lifespan means of intellectual property, normally generating some idea of an easement, generating royalties, or some thought of like maybe even, non-taxable income, or even the principle of annuity as a prepaid tax, or, what the deal is about the ERISA statute as compared to some idea of raising a bar. I mean, ultimately, if it's getting to some idea of similarities of like escrow, only involving, I don't think I've heard escrow ever used in any kind of way with any commercial venue involving a stationary engineer or depreciation. And I'm not sure if escrow is the deal about depreciation, and only a non-degreed issue involving like real estate, not necessarily the commercial venue of living quarters. And it seemed to be the big deal about the International Electronic Engineering involving, the Alpha 24, and, with the big O, the organization, the O being 15, being 39, but it seemed to be the deal about, ear squared, and, taco squared, and the deal about, 3939, like the acronym NYNY, New York, New York, and the alphanumeric, 3939 being 78, and a hard God, and the heartbeat of America, and what a ticket means in networking, some idea of governing what traffic only means in networking between some idea of a hub involving hardware, or the software side, like involving a node. The IP address is still the issue going through both of them. It's identified, yet it's not switched and routed internally to dissipate any idea of what is called a hotspot in software of like performance monitoring, normally of Orion performance monitoring, and how true it is, whether it's only my thought, maybe lack of experience of knowing or not knowing, whether if like Cisco is the thought of like networking as compared to the telephone involving Cisco, or the thought of like, the roller coaster, and, the pronunciation even involving the toilet, the SYSCO, and like the roller coaster, and some people's mind automatically don't identify the symbolic representation of Cisco being like the different links and poles that actually like manufacture, not the crazy straw, but the roller coaster. That's on, the book of the Geospatial Information Technology, the GIT, the 39 thing of Chase Oil, and, the telepathic TP of a Native American Indian, and whoever keeps doing it, it's really kind of frustrating about, okay, I mentioned the Statue of Liberty and the 7-point crown, okay, and it has been the idea of whether or not if governance is only the thought of a transmission involving, continual variable. It seems to be the thought, like I'm talking about, information is ultimately leading to the acronym of a commercial venue, whether if the T is going to be the thought of tariff, of some idea of like a percentile. My thing about the coupon, okay, and some idea, of some percentile that really I've been looking at, and the thing about Mercedes-Benz, okay, because Mercedes is like 72, okay, and it seemed to be the alphanumerics of like 72, and like, who's in what's in a mailbox about a coupon, and realizing, and even knowing it, and even talking about Mercedes-Benz on, in front of me, behind me, beside me, in oncoming traffic, I mean, everywhere, on 518 here in Pearland, several times, and every single time I didn't even realize it. I mean, until, and this has been going on, I mean, like, seriously, for, like, since, I think it's like 19, I think it was in 1983, I think it's actually a distinguishing turning point of actually knowing somehow, as a picture at the age of 15, and the beginning of the first, like, number of, like, the prefix of the White House, and the 456 thing about some information, including Mercedes-Benz, and a coupon, a percentile. In any case, yeah, so it seemed to be like a deal being a picture on a Padres, or the address, the P being silent, in proper English numerical composition, or some idea of like, save the Union address, or the address, the Padre, or, a picture's a picture based upon, the thought of, the Nolan Line Express, or California Angels, or what I've been like really thinking about here lately has been, the grayscale on the Houston Astros. I'd mentioned, Nolan Ryan having 2,000 strikes out in his career. It's like more than 6,000, okay? I mean, I really know that, okay, but I was thinking about, the Nostradamus and the new millennium and the Pi Squared beyond the year 2000 based upon you know, the 400 years of accuracy of Nostradamus predictions narrated by Orson Welles, okay? And the thing about Zion being 1,000 years in the new millennium, and kind of thinking about Nolan Ryan. But anyway, like, I mentioned that Nolan Ryan at the time was like, when he was wearing a uniform, with the grayscale represented, you know, different shades of orange on the uniform, and mentioning, like, you know, some idea of, like, Diners Club, the difference, what was normally just a blue circle with like a vertical line in it, there was like a specific duration that the emblem had changed, and the font size became thicker and wider, and the blue with the, like 5 shades of the grayscale, like it's almost like now it seemed to be like, you know, the 10 Commandments on 2 tablets. Some idea of like, you know, paraphrasing what 2-9 Hove golf courses is, or the idea between, you know, the Mercedes being some idea like between the Pentagon, the 5 side, and the 8 side of the octagon, or shadow government in a way of like a Stargate program. So anyway, like I was thinking about all that because the thing about what I'm really thinking about is right now is like center point energy had become a point being overbilled, and now seems to be the deal, you know, that I've been like, you know, mentioning as far as the transmission delivery service provider. I already got rid of one like center point because Texas and New Mexico Power, it seems to be, you know, now seems to be more and more like a requirement to have some idea. I mean, if it really needs to be attached, I mean, it would ultimately be the degree already like not having any issues there in an entire lifespan, and getting over the categorization of money of like, you know, even what, you know, current resident means as a coupon, or, you know, the thought of like international banking systems in a way beyond a method of banking, representative, you know, somehow of currency over the categorization of money in that way. And, you know, kind of like just looking at that and had a whole new perception when there was like a Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs presented the you know, the View with Barbara Walters after, you know, the fact of like 2020 with Hugh Downs. Okay, Howard Hughes in the Houston area is like the deal about oil, okay? Howard Hughes. And even the pronunciation, you know, like Native American Indian, like linguistic slang lingo, you know, it's like the how, Kemosabe thing, you know. And, you know, Howard Hughes and Barbara Walters had the View, okay, and it seemed to be ultimately now the pastel blue. It's like I'd mentioned previously, like in a video. This home was actually built and tore down. I mean, it must have been, you know, how long before, like, I remember anything about it being in diapers, okay? And then not really remembering, I mean, not one thing about it, okay? Moving to Houston with my parents on a Rapido Street side of South Park in Houston. And that's predominantly pretty much what I remember quite a bit of, you know, being in diapers, and some issue like even not really remembering it, although remembering something about going through it in Harris County and actually being taken on the same course. And I mean, if you want to call it a circuit, I mean, ultimately it's like the same one when I was in diapers. It's kind of like when I was like going through it again, I was actually remembering. And the same people, I mean, hadn't aged, I mean, a freaking day, going through it from place to place, and I'm like really kind of flipping in my mind, knowing that I'd been there in diapers, okay, and still not having the connectivity to so much here, and then tore down, okay, moved to Houston in 1969, I was like 4, turning in be 5 or 6 or something like that, and moved to Pearland, okay. Okay, and it was still wasn't at this location, like on County Road 107, 36 Lamona in Pearland, okay? I mean, like, this home was not here after that, okay? I mean, you know, I'd heard about certain areas and been in Pearland long enough to, like, know them us, and didn't ever hear, like, not one word about it, okay? I actually came here, and my parents moved here, and chose just, like, this acre of land, okay? And actually built this home with my parents at the time, predominantly. A lot of school missed because of it, you know, during baseball. Actually, you know, spent time, like, helping my parents build it, okay? Didn't remember not one thing about it, okay? Even years after, I mean, an entire, I mean, it really wasn't until I got on YouTube with my drums and really, you know, didn't have any complication. It's really getting a little frustrated thinking that maybe only a duration of only what lifespan means in intellectual property, what royalties only say, but, like, is it really the entire point? Some idea of like royalties in a way of like a continually have an issue. I mean, my name is Wade. I mean, am I going to be like continually the issue at the front lines of the beach, right? Having an issue whether or not it's, you know, citizenship and birthrights is only some idea of non-negotiable 9 times, it's non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization only based upon a method of banking as a non-degreed issue, or the idea of like somewhere in between business and corporate law, just like escrow, or some idea of like only what it means to have information or some idea of intermediary like easements that would only dictate whether or not if a method of banking is only the idea of governance, or what jurisprudence in that way would only suggest in the color code and warehouse district with that one word, the black word of like jurisprudence in the black back, representative in that way. If it's really getting to jurisdiction and defining multinational corporations, importing and exporting of plain horizons as compared to business law, a pie chart is that little round thing, okay, with some idea of percentile as compared to plain horizons of importing and exporting of like the aggregates of like monetary domestic gross national product, or what seem to be like I mentioned, some issues that seem to be predominantly the European standard of 240 volt, identifying the idea beyond 177 volt of lighting. Now, pretty much in English, an entire turning point. I'm sure that everyone will probably agree when the alphanumerics of 177 minus 26, it's like the U151 thing, and Secret Service, Jesus Christ, and Holy Spirit. Those three, like right there. And realizing something about the alphanumerics of 177 and the telepathic power and mental telepathy and subliminal message. Those three, predominantly minus 26, God, game, card, lie, ultimately equaling U151. Okay, and the three big ones about the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and Secret Service. Okay, not limited to. Okay, and I'm sure that's pretty much when everyone starts saying, "Hey, that's not a joke." That's for real. Like, really not funny. That's really not a joke. And I'm sure, like for me, like many after that, going beyond to a point of being impressed with it, almost fascinated. And then maybe getting over some idea of being impressed by it, and getting serious about really getting into it. And really, I've been really spending quite a bit of time that way. But anyway, so I was thinking about the CBT right now seems to be the thing about the difference between center point being used as some idea of reason zero, or a method of banking of international banking systems, of immigration and customs enforcement only representing the principle of practical application in like banking. Some idea of importing and exporting seem to be the thing about reason zero, and some idea of like what only a claim would only be. Ultimately, if a claim is the only thought of FDIC, the difference between business and corporate law, that's like some medium of like the quarter 250,000. It seemed to be like, really, is it a minimum requirement of business law having the right to assemble of like only a multitude of claims, ultimately being some idea? It would be considered a claim as compensation, only having the right to assemble of how many claims would it take to actually equate to the minimum and at the maximum at the same time of $250,000, as compared to some idea of like whether it's a tax credit or a prepaid tax. And the similarities of what that is to a FDIC claim at normally identified at a local level at 250,000, and normally that's only really, it's not even identified, but predominantly at a business level, not even corporate. But yet at a minimum, it would be obviously a minimum requirement for some idea of corporate law being the idea of like an eternal entity involving some idea like a annuity. Corporate law is so much about annuity, it's unreal. Many people's perception of like de facto might have a comparison of like corporations being involved that way, involving predominantly General Motors that way. When I was studying the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter, predominantly looking completely, totally focusing on that word de facto, I'd read so many cases that it ultimately got to like why I read anything else other than like General Motors. They predominantly, we're saying it so much. Reading anything else beyond that point was like, just like not cool. Just wasn't it anyway. It seemed to be the deal about General Motors involving that one word in the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter. Predominantly, I chose Southwest Court Reporter because obviously it's a Houston area. It seemed to be the thing about, Southwestern Bell and like Blue Bell and ice cream at the same time. Yet at the same time, Southwest seemed to be the deal about, the alphanumerics of like Los Angeles being like 109, or governor, or written, governor's president, 109 is 110, ultimately getting to the thought of the alphanumerics of 247. And a Robert E. Rubin quarter, the Secretary of Treasury, Robert E. Rubin. The thing about the tribe of Israel is like it's corporate law. and the way it's spelled with Reubin, being like one of the tribes of Israel, being like the tribe of scribes. Even using the stars is still the thing about the planetarium, isometric, and I mean, it's like automatically, it's like isometric. Even back in biblical times, I mean for real, and even exponential quotients of powers of multiplication in the planetarium that way, or the humor about, or the Richard Gere thing, the humor about raising the bar, and the Richard Gere thing in the planetarium. Yeah, and that perfect 10-10 vision using the stars that way, or the infinite lines of the 90-degree, likewise a quadrant representing 90 degrees, likewise at the same time, a spherical quadrant of the globe, and globalization being the word of international financial management. Well, anyway, it goes on and on, okay, because like I was thinking about, the thing right now seems to be like center point energy, because like right now, I'm in transitional, like, ultimately it seems to be, thing about getting Texas and Mexico power, and some idea of like, raising the bar like the equator, okay, and it not being a question of region zero, or some idea of Amazon.com, like in Pearland, the Houston area, or the excuse of like not knowing, where the equator's at, like, so raising the bar would be, the idea of about, it seemed to be like almost a requirement now, based upon, what I've read about the Roosevelt New Deal Act. It seemed to be like Texas and Mexico power, involving that type of information involved in the Roosevelt New Deal Act. It seemed to be like Texas and New Mexico power is like the requirement of like the Roosevelt New Deal Act. And some of the information that seemed to be sometimes it seemed to be like like the continual variable transmission, yet the CVT, the commercial venue of like the International Electronic Engineering, and only what the intellectual duration means, only the lifespan of normally what royalties is, maybe even the distribution of information of only what availability is, and sometimes and as only a manufacturer geographic option of what only availability means. And it seems to be, like even certain factors involving that, and not that it has to be a version, but only an intellectual duration that many people might not recognize as some idea of some like sheer genius of like an intellectual duration of lifespan, not necessarily a version, although that is the word, and obviously it's the non-degreed word. It's not presented as intellectual property or the intellectual duration of lifespan about royalties of what the meaning and value and content is of like intellectual property normally generating, the thought of a DVD, a motion picture, or like a compact disc or music video of like We International, and what, the real issue of lifespan is with like intellectual property that way, even television programming, or, what the memory means and value of distribution. As compared to, thought of what royalties is as compared to like annuity or a prepaid tax or, even escrow. I mean, it seemed to be like so many things that the perception and similarities, not that comparison would only be the idea of maybe not compatible. I'm talking about compatibility of analytical, and comparison, it's not, the and or neither nor. It's the similarities of compatibility, and that's the big deal about really computer programming. It's the compatibility. It's more so what it is, not necessarily. Many people might unintentionally use the word comparison, but really compatibility is really the deal about not a breach of copyright of like patents. Many perception of like copyright isn't necessarily having fair use of intellectual property, or a breach, maybe not knowing what a breach of copyright is. I mean, as a musician, like many people, automatically, even singers normally imitate, singers that they like, and musicians sometimes normally do that. If they're going to be musicians, and that seemed to be the only thing available in that way that would present maybe an entire band, the whole thing of as compared to maybe, starting out with like nothing and only like, oneself, which is perfectly fine and cool as well. But, having a whole show, just have, putting a compact disc in and, like going through the motion to perfection, it wouldn't necessarily be, maybe the thought of maybe not what is normally taught as it's not a breach, it's like perfect, okay? But not necessarily an infringement at the same time. It not being an infringement as compared to a breach. If it's not a breach based upon the perfection, Not that it has to be an imitation. The thing it is that perfection is the point of normally imitating anything about music. And normally music, as a musician or a singer, would be really the deal about it. And the deal about not breaching copyright would be, you know, the perfection of it, not necessarily an infringement. You know, only, you know, what only having fair use is as a standard necessarily, not necessarily maybe the thought of maybe, you know, I wouldn't even call it maybe the thought of, many people's thought of embezzlement would only be the thought of an internal, maybe a whole different perception of the McDonald's Golden Arches as compared to an external. Embezzlement normally associates what only participation normally gives the perception of within and involved, or having the appearance thereof, not necessarily the truth about, you know, the reality of what only intellectual obduration means. The thing it is about the breach isn't necessarily infringement, but the difference between like investment or the thought of maybe you know, I wouldn't even call it, you know, I don't want to get off on all that like right now. That's really not what I'm trying to talk about right now. But you know, the thing of it is that as a musician, as a drummer using YouTube, as a drummer, you know, just like going through the motions, even when I don't have my drums, like right now, I saw my Pro Vision VSX, you know, drum set with Strata Red with the black hardware, and it seemed to be, you know, maybe I need to just do that anyway, because maybe if the idea of like a duration seemed to be like the availability of the Pro Vision drum set in my mind seemed to be the issue of a Stargate program in the memory, something about that, you know. So like I went ahead and sold it, okay. And in any case, I would have got the Strata Blue. I mean, anyway, if it would have been available like the Strata Red was with the hardware, and the issue is like everything that was involved at the time is really the thing about it. But anyway, I'm like, you know, getting the complete, you know, like, you know, as soon as possible. Like I had, like you see me on my Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY at YouTube.com. It's like a total of 35 pieces, including hardware and special effects and cymbals, and you know, the hi-hat cymbal and the hi-hat tambourine, the chime, the bell, the cowbell, and all that stuff, you know. And in any case, so like yeah, so like a total of 35 pieces. Normally just 15-piece drum set with a double bass, a floor tom, a snare, and normally 3 rototoms and 4 octobons. Okay, it's like 15. Okay. But anyway, yeah, so like, anyway, like I'm getting all the Strata Blue and trying to do that as soon as possible. It seems to be like a lot going on right now. It's like continually, like, seriously, phenomenally, like, yeah, there's more to it than just like, you know, hey, yeah, there's a whole lot better things to do, but like, why wouldn't I be doing this right now? I mean, yeah. So like, anyway, so like, why wouldn't I be? It's because like, I'd really already like being like everything about like being more, you know, it's not that it has to be grandiose anxiety, but hey, I think it should be more of what I am, yeah. Yeah, for real. Yeah, why not? Yeah. So anyway, so like yeah. So it seemed to be the thing about, you know, the deal about Mercedes-Benz 72, and the cumulative rollover into the, you know, the new millennium. I know this is the year 2024, but some of the information involving Kobe ID 19 and like the 1999 and anything beyond the year 2000, the Kobe ID 19 actually being the issue after. And I think it started, I think it's like maybe what, was it 2016, 2015? I mean, it's been like quite some time. Kobe ID 19 has been going on for quite some time. It's like I told my dad before he passed away with cancer and choosing, you know, to stay at home in hospice. And I was taking care of him like all the way through it. But anyway, it's like I said, you know, it seemed to me that, you know, me studying alphanumerics and linguistics, it automatically had the alphanumerics of like Kobe ID 19 being the thought of like, you know, the alphanumerics of 72 and money, and you know, all that stuff and all that information. But anyway, so something about Mercedes being in Pearland, even the SUVs, and you know, the television series, there seemed to be some idea of like some issues involving, you know, the acronym SVUs, and at this point right now, it seemed to be the thing about, you know, certain factors like going through the Stargate program. The thing with this is that all that being presented at a certain time, that certain information in a mailbox involving, yes, a coupon and the current resident issue is like every single time, ultimately getting to the prefix of the White House. And the first point would be me even realizing it, or even thinking how could that have been without me even knowing or seeing it. Me being like what you're seeing on me right now on the wall, this lasers, like music video. the thing about, you know, like fog being added, okay, it's like you can see the laser beams, and you see it like all the way through, like predominantly, you know, if not 95% of every music video that I've made that's on it, involving like the lighting you see now, that's involving like a 3D graphic fractal animation, graphic animation as a 3D graphic fractal graphic animation, and like a multitude of like combinations and sequences of like different types of like lasers, as you're like looking at like right now behind me and on me, that you'll see like on a wall between like two sliding rear doors, okay, and like a lit up sign that has like, you know, anything I want to put on it. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so like with, you know, the lighting truss and above me and behind me, and the sometimes, not every video, some of the fog that allows the lasers to be very visible and in the music videos. And like right now there's no like fog and like anything other than, you know, the lasers looking invisible other than what it's shining on. And that's the thing, is that like something about being a pitcher in baseball involving like an invisible laser was something that was like at the age of 15, okay, and then like it's like how many years was it? Was it, see, for, what, 1979 to 83? How many years was that? What, 83 and 79? Anyway, it's like 4 years later, okay, it's like the beginning of the first number in the prefix of the White House, 4, 5, 6, and there was like, okay, from that point, okay, the fourth year being the issue, okay, and the Mercedes-Benz and the mailbox, and, you know, what's going on with the information in the mailbox, every single time involving the coupon, and the percentile and the syllable, you know, hey, the coupon being like the God's angel thing, okay, but the thing of it is that ultimately, you know, over a period of years, being 15 years, 15 being, you know, the big O, the face thing, and the 4, 5, and 6 of the prefix of the White House, although the area code being 202, but yet the prefix is like after the area code is the 3 prefix, okay? And the thing with this is that ultimately, you know, it got to that because every single time Mercedes was there and like in front of me, behind me, beside me, in oncoming traffic. It was unreal, Mercedes and SUVs, not always at the same time, but within the same, if it's ultimately getting to the Japanese thing about, you know, Oriental or the Chinese restaurant, and the year of my birth year being like 1964 and the year of the dragon being some idea of like an annual as a calendar year, within that duration, you know, the Mercedes-Benz and the SUV, yeah, most definitely during the 1 year period of like the fourth year, and then 5 years later, yes, very much so, the Mercedes-Benz again, and the SUV, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the zodiac and the annual as compared to the calendar year and the fiscal annual year, you know, normally a point of origin, normally this is not limited to, but yeah, it seems to be the thing about the difference between a calendar year and a fiscal, you know, fiscal annual that way, as a point of origin. The thing with it is that the Mercedes-Benz and SUV, they're in what would seem to be predominantly like the year of for the fourth year, after like a deal on as a picture, and the address on the Padres, the address is the CBS, and the deal about, you know, the word transfiguration being alphanumerics of 192, and the State of the Union address, the address. I mean, it seemed to be the thing about the alphanumerics, and even on the home theater being the deal about, you know, amplification, bandwidth, and spectrum, between the MKZ and the MKAC, and some like exponential quotients of power multiplication of like VSAT communications involving like NASA and like satellite communications. Likewise, it seemed to be like now the latest that I know of the Christian television network being TriStar. I mean, likewise, it seemed to be like a Mercedes thing of a Christian television network involving satellite communications, and that being TriStar. Okay, the thing with this is that, you know, Ted Turner has his thing about television satellite networks and, you know, like in orbit and around in space, like TriStar. And you know, the thing about CBN as compared to some other information, yeah, so like, yeah, so like I'm thinking about all that, and the 300 deal about the TriStar and the Tricentennial, and the difference between like 611 and 911 operator, or, you know, back to the triangle and the 6-point star of Israel, being like the biggest mouth of the river being the delta, and schematically it's like the triangle and the pi r squared about being, you know, from a 3-point triangle to a 6-point star and the Israeli flag, and all that stuff. But anyway, it's kind of like think about that, because that coupon, okay, and the current resident and the deal about Mercedes-Benz, and it seemed to be predominantly. In any case, it was like really when I started like putting myself on YouTube.com, and my channel Wade ASP Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com, and doing my music videos, that all these things were like really taking place, and I'm in a tent now. And it's almost like somewhere in my mind, like, you know, Sarah and like Abraham and I want to say Jacob. I'll have to. Anyway, I'm like really have a lot on my mind right now. It's like, you know, Sarah, and I think there's something about the tent being 59 and Highway 59, and the address and Highway 59 on the north side, what was then, you know, CBS, Channel 11, the Spirit of Texas, and the I, you know, representing, you know, the Spirit of Texas and CBS. Yet Eyewitness News being Channel 13, it's not necessarily the same, but Eyewitness News presents, you know, the ABC 13 Houston, the ABC 7 in Los Angeles has a difference of 6, yet, you know, Channel 11, what was then on the north side, how true it is it's still there, you know, being on Highway 59. The thing of it is that Highway 59 is Alpha America 140 in Pearland, Texas, and attenuation, all the stuff about, you know, beyond, you know, measuring cycle per second oscillation, and some idea of like waveform, beyond bandwidth and spectrum. Yeah. And in any case, yeah, so like I was saying about all that, and ultimately, you know, seemed to be the deal right now of like center point representing some idea like region 0, and what that is, and what region 1 is kind of like, you know, you got to be kidding me. A carbon footprint on the front lines of the Beachfront has been an issue of some idea like, you know, having gravity or not, as like citizenship birthrights is like up in the air, and don't even know what amphibious is to J. Edgar Hoover or the hovercraft, or some idea between John Wayne and Wyatt Earp, and I mean, for real. But anyway, yes, like, it's already going on. How long? It's already going on, like, what? Guys, like, I think 56 minutes and 45 seconds right now. I'm already talking way more. I'm really not. I mean, I could go on. It's just that, really, I don't want to just, like, do it for, you know, more than really an hour, because I know that's quite a bit. I've got quite a bit of, like, 1 hour talking like this about a lot of things, but right now it seems to be the deal about the test at the apprenticeship program on Coburn. And World News and National News presenting some idea of like covert mission being a difference of 6, and even J.D. Powers between the J and D being the difference of 6, and, you know, the power being 77, and the deal about, you know, J.D. Powers, and I mean, if it's ultimately getting to Telephone Road and Vantage Love 30, and the 100 Club that way of Vantage Love, like, you know, the 100 thing about, you know, Telephone Road, or, you know, the J.D. Powers thing about, you know, the Alphabetics are like, you know, telephone power. The 100 Club, yeah. Yeah, J.D. Powers, yeah. 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 In any case, so like, yeah, so it seemed to be the deal about even Six Flags that way. And, whole lot of stuff. But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm going to need to take a break here real quick, because I'm kind of like, you know, going way off into a whole bunch of different directions. But right now it seems to be the deal about region 0 and center point, being whether or not, if, you know, if it's like really the issue of, you know, maintaining some idea of like, well, it's not like really identity crisis, really? I mean, it's not. An identity crisis over what? A center point smart meter being region 0 as the international banking system method of banking. Are you kidding me? Like a shadow government, like Stargate program, huh? Huh. Wow. Yeah. Star is born, a telepathic star, huh? Yeah, so like any case, so like it seemed to be the Texas New Mexico Power might maybe be a little bit more about raising a bar, of GMC raising a bar thing about, you know, raising the equator. There's some idea of like the one and only like equator of latitude, equating to, you know, the thought of a 9-degree right angle, the Anglo-Saxon, yeah, the Neanderthal Paleolithic, yeah, Anglo-Saxon, yeah. Yeah, financial instrument, Anglo-Saxon, huh? Anglo-Saxon like the bagpipes, huh? Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's all that Ireland green stuff, huh? Yeah. So like anyway, yeah. So like a little bit of humor there, but yeah. So anyway, so like that's where it's at right now, and it seemed to be like really, you know, what I've been thinking about. I'm actually going on my memory. I mean, I covered quite a bit with looking at like a lot of information, including Roosevelt New Deal Act, predominantly, you know, what really originated from the book Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and read that information, you know, when the name Paul Volcker, okay, how true it is, I'm really not sure. Although that is the name, and I know that William Jefferson Clinton actually mentioned that he is so appalled, okay, and it seemed to be like a presidential book and reference that way of him just saying that he's so appalled. I see the thing about Paul Volcker, okay, the president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank during the time of Ronald Reagan administration, called in the New York Federal Reserve bank president to take over. Okay, it's almost like, like Robert E. Rubin of Citigroup, like the latest and the newest. It would seem to be the deal about, the tribe of scribes of like biblical times, the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe of Reuben, okay, and the way it's spelled being 69, like Texas or Jehovah, or the equator issue, going below the equator, or the thought of like Texas and or the border issue of like region 0 and center point being Mexico, and like ignorantly maybe excusing alphanumerically, not realizing that's being talking, heard, and thought of as being heard as some idea of witnessing. Yet New Mexico, who's anyone trying to kid? Obviously region 1 is like the United States and includes like, New Mexico. And alphanumerically, Mexico equals 69. Not that, the algebraic test and inversion is like, prejudice. Yet at the same time, hey, I'm not, trying to find, some idea of like everything as a method of banking, as the excuse of like, well, hey, I guess all he had to do was like, well, I guess you said so, yeah. So like anyway, I'm mentioning it now because it seemed to be the issue involving, region 0. Obviously, it seemed to be the issue involving Centerpoint, transfer delivery, service providing as compared to now. I'm working on getting Texas New Mexico power. Like immediately, and really already it seemed to be like my idea of the Roosevelt New Deal Act and some of the information I'd read at different times. Like I said previously, like for a while, I even got like Westlaw for free, and it was like during studying to be a paralegal, it was mentioned that normally the thought of having access to Westlaw is sometimes some idea of what was then some idea of like $125 an hour. But anyway, I got like I think it was like pretty close. It seemed like 3 months. Because I was on it. All the time for as long as possible, as long as it lasts. I don't know how it got on there. I just like got on it and was trying to get it, and I got it. Okay, so I was like studying a whole lot of international law involving like annuities and securities predominantly, and intellectual property, and things about like aggregates and monetary domestic gross national product, and the similarities of the 12 Federal Reserve banks. It seemed to be the Mercedes-Benz thing of like some ideal between like annuities as compared to the money itself, and the import and exporting of that fact of like the name as compared to the point of origin of like the source of like distribution of the meaning and value and content of like a annuity as a form of paper, sometimes identified maybe as a voucher like on the New York Stock Exchange. Not that it's a promissory note, but a whole different perception of a normal daily standard transaction at the New York Stock Exchange. Normal thought about that, and the thought about like free trade, North American Free Trade Act, and what that really is. Like on the floor, like the New York Stock Exchange. Like every day. It's normally not even thought or even talked about as like the North American Free Trade Act, or like an endorsement of like a checking account, or a registered charity, or some idea, or some strategic defect as some idea, like whether if it's an option as a deduction, and maybe not necessarily a tax credit of a prepaid tax on entire employment history, or an IRA or a recent statute. For real. Simulcasting some idea like in chronological, similarities at the same time of all these three combines of like huge shipments of importing and exporting, having like tons of money, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars being used and waiting for it to get there, going through a circuit and just like capitalizing on the interest for like only a few days, if sometimes normally identified in the book. Secretary Temple House Federal Reserve runs the country, and like the House of Cards of like international monetary funding. It all being like planned out and like waited for, and like everyone just like gaining huge amounts on the principal, on interest, only just using it and setting everything up I mean, gain hundreds of thousands. I mean, sometimes in hours, all day for like, normally it's identified normally as a week. I don't think I read anything more than like a 3-week period of like hundreds of billions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and during like even importing and exporting that way of like gross national product as compared to monetary and domestic, that represents some idea like the New York Stock Exchange. That's some idea like between domestic and and monetary as participation, not necessarily the ergonomic factor of like gross national product, of like, plain horizons, of like, corporate laws compared to the pie chart, more so of like, the thought of like the ergonomic factor, not necessarily the power of like, corporate law of import and export of like plain horizons as compared to business law. That's some idea of like a ratio, even HTTP colon being a ratio of like double /. But anyway, yeah, so like it's already gone on like an hour and God, what is that? I'm like 5 minutes and close to 100 hour and 6 minutes now. I'm gonna go ahead and like take a break, okay? Yeah, there it is, okay?